The tournament is heating up, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just go to FanDuel.com/BlueWire and sign up today to claim your no-sweat first bet. Then you can wager on everything from the money line to point spreads to which team will be cutting down the net. All on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So don't miss your shot at a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/BlueWire to sign up. Make every moment more with FanDuel. 21 plus and present in New Jersey. First online real money wager only. $10 deposit required. Refund issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 14 days. Restrictions apply. See full terms at FanDuel.com/sportsbook. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Hey everyone, welcome to The Final Four is Not on the Schedule. I'm your host Eric, alongside with expert analyst Rod. Thanks for joining us on the best MSU basketball podcast featuring in-depth recruiting, game matchup, and post-game analysis. We dive deep to give you the best tools to enjoy the Spartans and impress your friends and family. Hey everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod. We're here to discuss Michigan State's crushing 98, or really disappointing 98-93 loss to Kansas State in overtime in the Sweet 16 matchup on Thursday night in Madison Square Garden. Before we begin, I just want to send a quick thanks to Jay Masters. Jay sent a gift via Venmo. Thank you for your insightful shows. Thanks, Jay. We enjoy doing them. Thanks for listening and being a part of the show. I really appreciate it a ton. If you want to learn how to support the show, you can go to thefinalfoursontheschedule.com/support. You can give one-time gifts via PayPal or Venmo, or recurring means through Patreon. So to summarize this game, I guess, Michigan State came out okay, although it was pretty clear from the beginning that Kansas State came to play. They were making the plays. They did not do their characteristic turning the ball over a ton, although they had lots of near turnovers, but they were all kind of working. And Markquis Nowell, the guy was great. He even twisted his ankle and was hobbled for a while there, and they were clearly half the team they were when he was in the game. He came back in and steadied the ship for Kansas State, and they just were able to pretty much dictate play, I think, most of the game. That was sort of my impression. Michigan State had a lot of trouble defensively stopping Kansas State from scoring. Michigan State got a lot going, and this is the game, ironically, where they're finally hitting the threes, and it didn't really matter in this case. It kept the game close, obviously, and occasionally gave Michigan State the lead, but it was not the difference in the game we'd hoped, because partly, I don't know, there are a lot of things to look at. I guess, partly is Michigan State turned the ball over 13 times to Kansas State's only 5. Team that averages 16. Not that Michigan State's a team that turns people over much. Michigan State, shot 52% from 3. Actually outshot Kansas State from 3, but again, not quite enough. And the turnovers were the bugaboo at the end of the game, and a couple missed free throws. Michigan State was still really good from the line, but just a couple of those were the difference in the game. And a game like this, a few possessions, a point here or there is really what is the difference between winning and losing and advancing to the Elite Eight.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to say. First of all, although it wasn't a perfect game, certainly not in terms of defensive play by either team, that was in terms of game flow, spectacular plays, guys stepping up in big moments and delivering. That was... I feel pretty comfortable that it's the game of the tournament to date, for sure. Mm-hmm. And one of the better NCAA tournament games from a competitiveness standpoint, just teams trading haymakers back and forth that I've seen Michigan State play in a long time. I think that... Look, and this is true of Michigan State as well over the years. You need to be really good to get to an Elite Eight, to a Final Four, to a Sweet 16 for that matter. to win a national championship. That goes without saying. You also need to have some good fortune along the way. You just do. And Kansas State, you mentioned it, and it was something that definitely stuck out to me. Only committing 5 turnovers is shocking for that team. Absolutely shocking. And you could see, if you were paying attention, you could see why they commit a lot of turnovers, because they get loose. They get loose with the ball. They get loose with their focus. They try to hit home runs. And we talked about that in the preview. However, more often than not, when they had a breakdown, just a bad decision, somehow the ball bounced their way.
Yeah.
You know, either that they didn't end up turning it over and they were able to get a shot, or that the near turnover goes into a shot like it did with that ridiculous 3-pointer that Nowell hit at the end of the clock. But that's, you know, look, I'm honestly not trying to offer an excuse or denigrate what Kansas State did. That is what it takes to win in the tournament. You need to have some breaks go your way, because especially when you get to this level, look, you watch that game, as I think was fairly obvious by the way the line was, by the looking at these teams deeply and kind of trying to come to some conclusions about them. There's very little difference between them. Very little.
Yeah.
On another day, replay this game, Michigan State likely wins it, you know, in a tight.
Sure.
So when it's that kind of situation, which it often is, when you get to this round or beyond, the team that gets some good breaks to go their way is going to have a great chance to win. And so Kansas State had both. Markquis Nowell played one of the great all-time NCAA tournament games you're ever going to see. He set a record for an assist in an NCAA tournament game, 19, which is unbelievable. Had 20 points, didn't shoot great. And, you know, when I talk about good fortune, that last possession that Kansas State had, where they're up 1. He takes, and we talked about this in the preview, he took a terrible shot. That's an awful shot that he took. And he got a break because AJ, and it wasn't AJ's fault, he's trying to contest. He gets a finger on it, and then the guys underneath don't realize it was deflected, and they let it go out of bounds. Kansas State has 4 seconds left. They end up getting the ball in the inbound to Masood, who hits like a 17-footer. That's them's the breaks, you know? And that doesn't excuse Michigan State for not doing a better job defensively. But give them credit. Those guys, I think the best thing you could say about Kansas State in this game, just besides Nowell's overall game, which was phenomenal, is when opportunities presented themselves, they took full advantage. When there was a break like that, you know, like that play I'm talking about, and there were plenty of others too, they generally took advantage. And that's what you got to do. So credit to them. They made enough plays. I think Michigan State obviously would like to do some things differently on the defensive end, but look, I have a hard time coming hard at Michigan State after a game like that. This was not a game like some others this year where you said, we just didn't play well. Michigan State did some great things in this game. Not just 3-point shooting, but that was among them. And it was huge. It was a massive factor. But they're a great 3-point shooting team. It had to show up. That's what we said in the preview.
Yeah.
They were overdue. So they were due for a game like this. I think the way Kansas State shot it was a little surprising. Give Nowell some of the credit for that because he was finding guys. But they had some guys. I mean, when you're hitting shots from the logo, and Kansas State had a couple of those.
Yep.
And you've got non-shooters hitting threes, which they had a few of those. You know, what can you say? I mean,
right.
It's just one of those days. I think Michigan State was really good on the offensive boards. We talked about that as an area they could possibly exploit, and they did. Little bit disappointing with the turnover numbers from MSU. 13 is a little higher than you would have liked to see, but the story there, in my opinion, was not so much Michigan State's turnovers. It was that Kansas State only committed 5.
Yeah, that was
which
amazing.
I would have bet. I mean, Nowell averages 3.5 by himself per
Right.
game. That's what he averages.
Yeah.
Now we talked about, he's a dynamic player, but he does a lot of good things, but he also makes mistakes. He takes some bad shots. He commits a lot of turnovers. He has elevated his game in this tournament to date to an incredible level. This is not the guy he's been. He's been a really, really, really good player most of the year. He was something more than that tonight, and he's not been that. So, again, it's another thing you need. You need your best players to be your best players to win in the tournament. And Kansas State certainly got that. I mean, you have Nowell had the game he had. Johnson scores 22 points, very efficient, 10 of 18 from the floor. That's big. That's huge.
Yep.
That you get your best guys to show up. On the Michigan State side, AJ Hogard was great. I mean, just did a lot of great 25 points in that second half, and even in overtime, he was a monster. Tyson Walker just stepping up, hitting incredible shots. The shot to tie it, to take it into overtime,
Yep.
obviously a huge take and make. But by the way, a play that he didn't make last year.
Right.
He really struggled to convert at the rim last year. This year, we've seen him get better and better, and it showed up when they needed it most. Joey Hauser ends the game with 18 points. Was huge, especially early on with his shooting and helping to carry Michigan State. And Jaden Akins, who had been struggling shooting, 14 points, 4 for 5 from 3. Offensively, and even Malik Call. Malik's going to take a lot of grief for that missed free throw.
Yeah.
Late. But you know what? Look, Kansas State still made a play on the next possession. So it's not like, we get the ball and we're in position to, you could win it with a 3, I suppose.
Sure.
But Kansas State still scored after that. So I'm not really sympathetic to any Malik Call bashing. I thought Malik, he had 13 points, 5 for 8 from the floor, 8 rebounds, had a big and one. I think it was late in regulation, if I remember correctly, to help them get back in it. A lot of good things from him. I think if you want to look at where the game was won and lost, I think there's a very obvious, to anybody who watched it, there's a very obvious place to start. And that is that Michigan State simply could not contain Markquis Nowell in the pick and roll. Could not do it. They tried different guys. You had all 3 of the 5s played. They went small ball for a long stretch.
End of the game. Yeah.
And none of it were end of regulation and overtime.
Yeah.
And nothing slowed him down.
It changed the way they scored, but it didn't really, they didn't stop him.
Well, not really, because he was doing the same things against everybody.
Yeah, I suppose.
They really never contained him. And so, look, Nowell presents a really difficult challenge because he is ultra quick and he has a great handle. And if you watch the Kentucky game, Kentucky hard hedged. They did everything they could try to get the ball out of his hands. He wouldn't give it up. He would beat the hard hedge. Michigan State did not hard hedge. Michigan State was trying, if you watched closely, you would see their pick and roll coverage. They were mostly trying to string him out toward the sideline, but they weren't very successful with it. And he did a phenomenal job of being able to put himself in position to deliver a pass off of that action. And I lost track of how many people he found at or near the rim on those plays.
Oh, yeah.
It was just, you don't rack up 19 assists without a lot of those, and he had a lot of those.
Sure. Yeah.
So I don't know what the answer is, but I know that what Michigan State didn't slow him down. I don't know if Michigan State trying to hard hedge more aggressively would have produced different results. Again, the scary thing is I watched Kentucky do that, and he just beat it.
Mm-hmm.
He just beat it with his handle and his quickness. And if he beats a hard hedge, then you're absolutely done. You got no chance to recover back into the possession. So I think that's the reason why you didn't see a more aggressive approach from Michigan State in that. But what they didn't work either. And that was really the key to the game. I mean, when you watched an overtime and there was that long stretch from probably about the 3.5 minute mark till near the end of the game, where the two teams were just trading baskets
right
back and forth,
yeah,
and nobody could stop the other. Well, that was how Kansas State was continuing to score. And I was reduced to just praying that he was just going to make a mistake.
Yeah.
That he was going to put a little too much mustard on a pass and sail it into the stands, something like that. Because if he kept playing the way he was playing, he was going to execute and execute and execute. I mean, really, even in he was so good that he helped beat Michigan State even when he didn't see the ball. I'll give you an example. That last Kansas State possession in overtime where Massoud gets the 17-foot jumper. The reason Massoud was open is Nowell, who had been inbounding before they called the timeout. Then they took him off the inbound. He was trying to get open. And A.J. Hoggard bit just for a second and took, if you watch the replay, if you can stomach it, you'll see what I mean. A.J. Hoggard takes a step toward Nowell. He was being covered by Akins, so he wasn't A.J.'s man. But A.J. takes a step toward him. That gives enough space and enough time. Massoud moves toward the corner, and you saw Malik try to come off his man and recover, and he got a half-ass contest, but it wasn't his fault. He just, it's all he could do. But that's what I mean. Nowell was so effective that he pulled a guy off Massoud to get Massoud an open look that he buried. I mean, it's just phenomenal game from him.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess, if you look at things that Michigan State did well offensively, hitting the threes, obviously, and then really exploiting those switches because Kansas State was switching 1 through 5. They never really got anything down low, which is what we expected. That they weren't able to punish because they switch. Nowell would go down there with Sissoko, and they really didn't exploit that. But still, it did matter because Hoggard would usually drive and get to it, especially in the second half.
There was one frustrating sequence, and it might have even been in the first half, I can't remember, where they had Nowell switched on Mahdi.
Yeah, it was.
Now, I'm not a proponent generally of forcing the ball into Mahdi, but that was one time where it should have happened.
Yeah.
And it didn't. But you're right. Michigan State did not have problems getting into the paint because its guards were able to do that. I mean, the second half and overtime that A.J. Hoggard had was phenomenal. Tyson Walker, phenomenal. I mean, those guys played high-level offensive basketball. And it meant that I don't know what the final numbers were. I don't think we have it in our box score. I'm gonna take a look and see if I can points in the paint.
Oh yeah.
I can't get to it, but I would imagine that it was. I'm sure Kansas State had an edge, but Michigan State was competitive. They were more active there than we're used to seeing, primarily because of the guard play.
Yeah.
I mean, those guys were just, and Kansas State, it's worth noting, a team that is middling in terms of the number of threes they give up, but outstanding in terms of the percentage they give up. That's the defense that Michigan State absolutely shredded.
I've got the numbers here. It's 44-36 advantage Kansas
points
State.
In the paint?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
that sounds about right.
Yeah.
I mean, look, if you're telling me Michigan State's getting 36 points in the paint, I feel pretty good. It's not a surprise that Kansas State had an edge there because they're generally speaking a little less reliant on threes. Not so much today, but I'm saying generally.
Mm-hmm.
And so much comes off their pick and roll action that you would expect it, even though, as you saw, they don't really have a post up threat. I mean, Johnson did a little of that, but that's not really even his game so much.
Yeah.
But that's a competitive number for MSU. I'm not bothered by 36 points in the paint. The difference for Michigan State, honestly, it comes down to two things primarily. One much more so than the other. A little bit on the turnovers. You can't completely write that off. And then a lot on the inability to do anything with Nowell. I mean, that is, I can't think of an individual performance against Michigan State in an NCAA tournament game that I would rank ahead of that.
I can't imagine.
I can't. There might be one somewhere, but I can't. It doesn't spring to mind instantly. I mean, that was phenomenal, and especially so when you consider how competitive that game was, how closely it was played. Every possession was huge. There was never a point really, once you got down to winning time, where either team could relax, say, all right, we got a 10-point spread. You can be a little loose. Yeah. Every possession was high pressure, and that kid just delivered and delivered and delivered. And Michigan State's guys mostly were there blow for blow with him. They just came up a little short in the end.
Yeah, points off turnovers is actually interesting. It was 16-2 advantage Kansas State. I think
that's big.
They had 10 steals out of the Michigan State's 13 turnovers. I don't think they were usually they weren't like fast break points, because the fast break was pretty close. It was 8-2 advantage Kansas State, which I think felt about right. I don't think Kansas State got a whole lot of.
Yeah, that's a big number though.
Yeah,
in a 5-point overtime game, that's a big number. We can look at, and second chance points again. I don't have those in front of me, but I would imagine Michigan State had an edge there.
15-11.
Yeah, so you get 4 back, so that means it's a 2-point swing. Points off turnovers versus second chance points. 2-point swing in Kansas State's favor. Well, it was that kind of game. With 2 points, and we had said that in a game like this, that you expect to be close, little advantages are going to matter a whole hell of a lot.
Yep.
If you can just get, a couple extra possessions via an offensive rebound, or you get a couple of easy baskets off a turnover, that can be the difference. And you could argue that there were some things in this one that played in Kansas State's favor, but I don't know. There's a hell of a lot more to say about it than that, in the sense that, I don't want to hear, and there will be elements of the fan base that rant and rave, because they always do if you lose. But Michigan State did a lot of things very well. Michigan State was equal to the task in a Sweet 16 game. They were. Mm-hmm. They made big plays, big shots, got some big stops late, certainly in regulation. They did a lot of good things. I am not bothered by the effort. I'm disappointed that they couldn't come up with a better defensive approach in this one. But, sometimes when a guy is just elevating himself to another level, and that is what is going on with Markquis Nowell right now, make no mistake. You're talking about a very good player who is now something beyond even that at the moment. Sometimes it just doesn't matter.
Yeah, he sort of had an A++ effort, and Michigan State even coming with an A- game. That's the difference right there. I guess let's talk about some individual players, but before we do, let's just briefly mention our sponsors. We appreciate all of you who support our sponsors. It is springtime in Michigan, and so if you're in the west side of the state, in Grand Rapids area, please check out the Brothers Who Just Do Gutters. They will take care of all your water problems. They'll check out your gutters, they'll clean them out, they'll repair them, they'll replace them. Kurt Stauffer and his team, that's all they do, and they're very professional, and they do a great job. If you mention Final Four, you get 10% off. You can contact them at Kurt, KURT.Stauffer, STAUFFER at brothersgutters.com. You can find a link for that in the notes below. So just going through the players, we've mentioned a few of them already, but Joey Hauser's last game for Michigan State, almost for sure. He finished with 18 points, 6 rebounds. He had a steal. He was 4 for 9 from 3. He definitely was the one in the first half, especially, who was keeping Michigan State in contact when things were just kind of a little bit shaky. 4 for 5 from the line. He missed the front end of 1-1. That was his only miss, really. So great effort. Just the typical Joey we've had for pretty much the entire season.
Yeah, I mean, what a great senior year for him. I'm sorry it's not going to continue because it was a blast watching him play this year. I think the confidence that he found within himself to play with, and how that translated to the things he did on the court this year for Michigan State, just phenomenal. And he played very well today. I mean, he struggled like everybody else in pick and roll defense, but
Yeah.
Honestly, if you're telling me Mady Sissoko is not doing the job, that's telling me that it's a big challenge. I'm not going to come at Joey so hard for that. Really important in the first half, as you mentioned, helping them stay in contact.
AJ Hoggard played 40 minutes. He was 7 for 14 from the field, 1 for 2 for 3, 10 for 11 from the line, a couple of rebounds, 6 assists, 4 turnovers, 2 blocks, and finished with 25 points. I thought he was he didn't seem quite himself to start the game, but certainly by the second half, he was kind of locked in again and sort of was like the AJ wanted. So, I don't know that, again, I don't know that it matters in the first half, but maybe, but he played, I mean, he was fantastic at the end of the game, and he showed you what he could be. And I mean, makes you excited for next year. See what, who knows what the pieces are going to be around, but I'd like to see a guy like him, if he starts bringing that intensity every game, and then with, and he can probably, his shooting will be even better next year, I would imagine.
I'm pretty happy with the way AJ played. Now, there were some moments defensively, but there were moments defensively for everybody.
That's everybody, yeah.
I thought besides, even apart from their struggles in the pick and roll, it's also worth mentioning Michigan State just really struggled with switches in this game. So there were some times where AJ was part of not executing a defensive switch properly. He had a big play late in the overtime where he just lost touch with Johnson, and they were able to get a lob for an easy bucket.
Yeah.
And that was on AJ. So he had some defensive issues, but man, the way he showed up when it mattered most offensively, just play after play after play, with the pressure on, delivering through contact, forcing the action. It was what you want to see from him.
Yeah. And
so I think that, AJ really responded to a bad game against Ohio State in the Big Ten tournament. And, there's obviously things you can critique and things that they're going to look back at in this one and regret. But this was a very good 3-game run for AJ Hoggard, and it should serve as a springboard into a senior year that could be something else. That's what should happen.
Right. And I think, the fact that he was 10-11 from the line really showed his focus in the second half. And he was recognizing he was getting his own when he had to get his own, when that's what the defense was serving up. And he was, I think it was brilliant.
That's what I mean.
Yep.
His decision-making late was great. He put it on his shoulders a lot, but that's what I want for him. That's what he should do. So, a lot of good things from him.
Tyson Walker played 41 minutes. He was 6 of 16. He was 2 for 9 for twos and 4 or 7 from the line, from 3 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 turnovers. That big one at the very end, which, that kind of helter-skelter last possession, finished with 16 points.
Let's talk about that last possession. There were, I don't know what there were, maybe 11 seconds left?
Yeah,
12?
something like that. 11, 12, yeah. Because there's a question whether you foul, and it's like it was still 12 and a half seconds or something left.
Right. Yeah. And I think that Michigan State was trying to do what I would have suggested, which is get a 3 up quickly.
Yeah. So you get
one, it gives you a chance at an offensive rebound, and maybe you get a second chance. But 2, you're getting it up at a point in the shot clock where Kansas State probably isn't going to automatically foul you. I haven't watched Tang enough this year to know whether he's a foul guy or not.
Right.
But you assume that he is. And they had a couple looks. I'm not saying they were wide open, but I thought Joey, I'd have to go back and rewatch it, but my anecdotal impression was I thought Joey had a little bit of a window.
Malik definitely
and then I thought Tyson had a window, or Malik did too.
Yeah.
When the ball got to Tyson, it was a little late.
It was.
And obviously Nowell was able to kind of deflect it and then end up getting a breakaway lay-in to ice it. But yeah, I thought there were some looks. I look in Malik's case, he just hasn't been able to hit threes
No,
lately.
he hasn't looked confident
And
shooting.
so, yeah, and I don't know if I can really blame. I mean, they needed an attempt, but I don't know how much I can blame him. Joey was the guy that I thought had at least half a look and didn't take it. And I understand you want to get a great look, but they were in a situation where I don't know that they could afford it. Anyway, going back to Tyson, look, the guy made just huge plays at big moments, none bigger than that layup to take it into overtime. I mean, um, my only criticism of him offensively is I think there were times, and it happened even in the overtime, where uh, he had a big in a switch and he dribbled himself into a long two.
Yeah.
And, that's a hard thing to critique because a player has a feel, a shooter, a scorer has a feel. And it's really hard for me to, go after a guy and say, oh, no, you can't dribble yourself into that shot, because he's feeling the rhythm of the game, of his game. And he opted to take those shots. I personally think those ended up being maybe more contested shots than a three would have been in those situations, because those guys can't extend out as much. When you're getting closer to the rim, they're going to be able to stay a little closer to you and contest it a little bit better, usually. And, when he did get switches and look to exploit it for threes, it normally came up positively for him.
Right.
So that was my only criticism, but he played a hell of a game, especially in the second half. And boy, there was a point where when he hit that three in overtime to give MSU a 3-point lead, I was really beginning to think, boy, all the coming back home to New York stuff around Nowell and the great way he played is all going to go for naught, because the other New York guy is going to win this. And I really did feel that way when he hit that shot. Of course, it was not to be.
Yeah.
But still a very, very good game from him overall.
Jaden Akins played 38 minutes. He played almost the entire game, 5 for 9 from the field, 4 for 5 from 3. So he found his 3-point stroke, 3 offensive rebounds, a lot of big ones. He had some early, 3 assists, 3 turnovers, 3 blocks, a steal. 14 points. Look, you definitely see what he's going to be, right? And you think he's going to be even more.
He was great,
right? Yeah, he did play.
He was
really
great.
Well.
He was great, and I thought, for what it's worth, he did the best job defensively on Nowell. The one thing you can say is he slowed Nowell down as a scorer in that game. Nowell was still able to make plays off pick and roll action, but he stopped scoring as easily as he was later in that game when Jaden was on him. So I thought Jaden gave MSU the best game of anybody against Nowell. It still wasn't good enough, but it was definitely the best of anybody they threw out there.
Yeah. And then Malik Hall, 32 minutes, 5 of 8 from the field, 0 for 2 from 3, 3 for 5 from the line, 8 rebounds, 3 of them offensive, a couple assists, 3 turnovers, a block, 13 points. The only critique I'd say with Malik is that he just does not look comfortable shooting either his 3 or any sort of jumper, or even from the free throw line. He just doesn't look like he's confident with that shot.
I think that's true. And I think that he really hasn't looked totally together offensively since he came back the second time.
Yeah,
when he came back the first time off the injury, if you remember,
he
had
thought
like
he's
11
fine.
points.
Yeah.
And he looked good. He actually looked pretty good offensively during that whole stretch he was able to play. When he re-injured it, the second time he came back, I don't think he's ever quite gotten back to being as comfortable as he was. But look, 8 rebounds, 13 points, had some big moments in this game for sure, especially down the stretch in regulation. He had that
the end one.
He had that putback.
Yeah.
He wasn't able to cash in on the free throw, but I think we're hoping obviously that Malik comes back. I think he can be a key part of this team next year with a healthy, as he was this year, but I think he could be even better with a healthy offseason. Find his offensive confidence again, which I think will happen as he has more confidence in his foot and he gets healthier. But, he made some major contributions in this one too. So,
Yeah, Mady Sissoko played only 16 minutes. He was 2 for 3 from the field, had a free throw, two defensive rebounds for finishing for 5 points. And I think, going along with Carson Cooper, who played 12 minutes, had 2 offensive rebounds, no defensive rebounds. He'd end up with 4 fouls and 1 assist. Both those guys, well, I think I would say Mady definitely looked a little better out there defensively. But, I think it became pretty clear that neither one defensively was making much difference, and then you're just losing offense, and so you might as well play small. I mean, I just kind of felt that's sort of what the coaches moved at that point in the game.
It was the right move in my opinion, because normally my argument would be, hey, Mady for sure gives you the best possibility at slowing down a pick and roll heavy guard. But it wasn't happening in this game. Nowell was frequently, and this was one thing that moving to the small ball lineup did change positively for MSU. I don't recall many or maybe even any occasions against the small ball lineup where Nowell was able to split the coverage. There were some against the bigger players where he was able to split between the defenders, and that's just a disaster. When that happens, there's just no recovering from that in the possession.
Yeah.
So for whatever reason, Michigan State's, but again, I'm going to say it wasn't just Michigan State that had this problem.
Right.
I watched Kentucky, a very good defensive team coached by a very good defensive coach in John Calipari, also have huge problems containing this guy. So look, I'll say it. I really felt, because I had seen Nowell a handful of times in the regular season, probably 4 times maybe. And I thought he was very good, but I also thought he was mistake prone. And that's kind of what I figured we would see. I thought the Kentucky game where he wasn't mistake prone and just made, just huge plays, huge shots. I just felt, okay, that's a one-off. And the odds of him playing that smoothly again are probably pretty slim, particularly with the way Michigan State's been defending. Well, guess again. You can actually argue MSU didn't do a half bad job on him as a scorer. He went, what did he shoot in this game?
Nowell? He was 7 of 18, 2 for 6 from 3, and that one crazy 3,
Yeah, 7 of 18 is not, it's not horrendous, but it's not a dominant shooting performance. And again, I attribute a lot of that to the job Jaden Akins did later in the game on him. Jaden was able to take him away some as a scorer. Unfortunately, Michigan State was not able to take him away as a playmaker.
Yeah.
But anyway, going back to Mady, made some plays early, but defensively it just was not happening. And despite the fact that Kansas State continued to be able to score, I do think the move to go small was the right one.
Yeah. Cooper really struggled.
That's how it felt to me.
Yeah. Cooper was really was kind of lost out there. He was not very good, but
tough assignment, man.
Yeah.
Tough assignment.
For sure. For a guy who's really not played that many minutes this season, right? To kind of throw him into this situation. Holloman had a little turn for 5 minutes and, had the same problem everyone else did in trying to contain.
Yeah.
Nowell.
Couldn't guard him.
Yeah.
Couldn't guard him.
All right, so let's go through the keys of the game in just a moment.
As if the McCrispy couldn't get any better, Bacon and Ranch just entered the chat. The Bacon Ranch McCrispy, available at participating McDonald's for a limited time. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
The madness is here, so get in on the fun with the Big Bets on Campus podcast from Action Network, every round of the NCAA tournament. So check us out on the Big Bets on Campus podcast. Let's find some winners.
All right, the 5 keys to the game brought to you by Nudge Printing. Nudge Printing are the ones who are involved in the Spartan Strong shirt production. So you can go over to Nudge Printing at nudgeprinting.com. There you can get your Spartan Strong shirt to help support the Spartan shooting victims. You can also get all sorts of other great Spartan gear for, obviously basketball. They've got some vintage Gruff Sparties. They also have all your tailgating needs. You can get it all filled there. Both hoodies and t-shirts are incredibly comfortable. We have a bunch in our household, and our shirts that we have for our show, you can get those as well. You can get those through the link below. So you get 20% off if you enter Final Four as a coupon code. Make sure Final Four is one word. So I had someone who was having trouble getting the code to work, but they realized if they paint it one word, they get the 20% off. So Gabe and Brittany are Michigan State alums, and they do a great job, and you won't be upset that you went through Nudge Printing to get your Spartan gear. All right, so the 5 keys of the game will begin. Number 1 is connected. Michigan State mostly defensively. And obviously they weren't. Maybe you could say they were kind of, but just Kansas State and Nowell just picked them apart, kind of did whatever they wanted for the most part. And even when you felt like they did make a play, then Masud rises up from 30 feet away and hits a 3 from the logo or whatever. And I don't know. It was just one of those games in some ways.
Well, like as I said at the outset, if you're going to win at this time of year, you got to have some things go your way. And Kansas State had enough shots that were bad shots that fell, and enough plays that were right on the verge of being a turnover that weren't, that it made the difference.
Yep.
But none of that. This is the big failure in this game from the Michigan State perspective is, they played a pick and roll heavy team in Marquette who has been outstanding, statistically far better than Kansas State in terms of efficiency, in part because they don't turn the ball over and Kansas State turns it over a ton.
Right.
Well, Kansas State did not make mistakes today, and Michigan State was unable to handle the pressure that their pick and roll and their movement and forcing switches put on them. Michigan State was not connected. And again, I'm going to give a lot of the credit to the point guard for Kansas State for that, but not all of it. Certainly some of it is down to the job that Michigan State did not do defensively. And when they look back at this game, I'm positive that's the thing they're going to look at, because God knows that even with the 13 turnovers, Michigan State played well enough offensively to win the game.
Oh yeah. For sure.
I mean, there's no doubt about that. They shot the lights out. In the second half, they got a ton of stuff going downhill at the rim. So that was fine. They were solid on the offensive boards, and they hit their free throws. So there wasn't a lot to complain about offensively, even with 13 turnovers. It was the defensive end. It's just, like I said, that I don't know if anybody else watching had the same feeling I did. In that overtime, it really started to feel like whoever gets the ball last is going to win, because neither team can stop the other.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. When we think about Michigan State teams that win in March, usually the equation is they get stops when it matters. You think about that Marquette game down the stretch. Yes, Tyson Walker hit some big shots. They got some big offensive plays, but it was the ability of Michigan State to shut Marquette down.
Yeah.
That enabled them to spread that margin out. They just couldn't do it here. It was every possession, score. Just these teams landing offensive haymakers against each other. That's what made it such an entertaining game to watch. I wish I didn't care about the result, because
I know.
I imagine.
I know. Yeah.
I just quickly, before we started recording, I looked at social media response, and I follow a lot of the national basketball writers, and all the reactions were, of course, about the insane game that Nowell played, but in general, they were all talking about what a classic this game was. And I'm sure it felt that way if you didn't have an emotional investment in it, and you could just marvel at the way these two teams just went back and forth at each other scoring.
Yeah. Well, there certainly was another game
not
playing.
Easy plays either.
Right.
Not easy plays.
Yeah. The other game was Connecticut was winning by 30, I think, at that point. So there's no point in watching that game unless you're an alum of those teams.
I think most of the eyes, you're right.
Yeah.
Most of the eyes came over to TBS.
So the second key to the game, the threes. Well, Michigan State hit 13. They were 13 to 25 for 52%.
Phenomenal.
They hit more threes in this game than they did in the first two games. Actually, almost twice as many as they did in the first two games.
Yeah.
So back to their sort of usual ways, whatever, people were talking about the basketball maybe being a problem or something like that, but they hit the threes.
Yeah,
and
it wasn't a problem today.
And I think, had we thought they were going to hit 13 of 25, we both would have thought they'd win. right? I mean, I don't think we would have thought much.
Well, I didn't count on Kansas State. What were they? 11 for 25.
11 for 11 for 24. Yeah, so they're pretty good too.
So they were almost 50% themselves. Yeah. They're like a 35% shooting team. That's beyond what they normally do. Well beyond what they normally do. And look, give them credit. They made the shots, but this is what I'm talking about. You have to be really good, but you also have to have some things fall your way that could go either way, that aren't automatics. And part of it for Kansas State was guys, I think Carter was 2 for 3. I forget what he shot from 3 on the year, but it wasn't good. I know that.
Yeah, that's 32%, I think.
Yeah, 32% shooter going 2 for 3. Okay. you know,
right.
The falling 3 that Nowell hits, Masood from the logo. I mean, look, sometimes in basketball, you just have to tip your hat and say, nice shot. The one that Masood hit, that 3, was actually well defended.
Yeah,
it really was.
He wasn't alone.
Malik contested. Now, he wasn't right up on him, but he shouldn't be at 30 feet or 27 or whatever it was. He shouldn't be right up on him. You shouldn't be. I don't care. Unless your name is Steph Curry, you shouldn't be up on somebody that far out, any player. So that was well defended. And that's, Carter hitting 2 threes. You know what? I will guarantee you, Michigan State's game plan going in was, if that kid wants to shoot, let him.
Yep.
Let him prove he can hit them. Well, he hit 2 out of 3. Okay, sometimes that's how it goes. I saw some people at halftime bitching about open threes. You have to understand that sometimes you're never going to be able to take away everything. And the pressure that Nowell was putting on them, they were more concerned about Nowell getting into the lane and creating havoc there. And so it meant one of the consequences of that and of sending help at him when he would turn the corner is you are going to give up some looks. I'm not saying that's by design, but in terms of the various sins you can commit, having Carter shooting threes is one you'll live with.
Yeah.
He kid hit 2 or 3, tip your hat. I mean, sometimes that's how it goes. So that's the only disappointing thing about this facet of the game is that Michigan State had one of their best shooting games of the season. And that's saying something because they shot it really well this year, but this was tremendous. And they barely had an edge.
Yeah, the other team had their best
barely.
Game.
Yeah.
Probably.
I would be surprised if Kansas State had a better shooting game. Certainly not against a high major opponent.
Sure,
I'd be shocked.
So the third key to the game was attack. And certainly in the second half, Michigan State really was attacking the rim. AJ and Tyson, rolling. I mean, they were phenomenal. And I, the only negative you'd say there is you look at Michigan State 9 for 9 for the free throws in the first half, 5 for 8 in the second half. And so, again, just leaving a point here, there, and when you have an overtime game. And so
they were only 14 for 17.
The 18 for 22 for the game because they're 4 or 5 in the overtime. So they shot 100% in the first half, 62% in the second half, and then,
what's an interesting number? And what did Kansas State have in free throw attempts? It wasn't that many, like 14 or something.
They were 11 for 16.
11 for 16. Okay.
And Nowell had 4 for 4.
Michigan State shot 6 more free throws, and that's an honest advantage because Michigan State in this game was not the recipient of Kansas State fouling them late to try to stay in the game.
Right.
Like that's a pure number.
Right. Exactly.
Kansas State was very good at getting to the line this year. That was a real area of advantage for them offensively. What Michigan State did in this tournament, that is, I believe I'm right about this. That's 3 straight games that they had more free throw attempts than their opponent.
Yep. That's true.
I don't know if we could, I'd have to look, but I'm going to guess at least once they got into Big Ten play, we would probably not be able to find 3 consecutive games where they did that.
I can't even think of 3 games,
season.
but I'm sure they did.
Yeah, right. Right. No, but not many.
Yeah.
Not many. I mean, look, we know this. They shoot. They're right down near the bottom in terms of free throw attempts. So I think if there's something that, in a global sense, assuming, you get the guys back that you want back and all those things, if there's something that this group can take into next year and really feel good about, and hopefully build on it from this tournament, from these 3 games, it's that they found that level of aggressiveness. And it wasn't even just a matter of, okay, AJ's going to hit some layups. It was, they were active and physical and aggressive, and that produced good things in terms of getting foul shot opportunities. So that was a real positive. And as you said, didn't see a lot of it in the first half, but in the second half in the overtime, it was there. I mean, Michigan State's guards were really good.
Yeah. So then fourth key to the game was the offensive boards. Kansas State, not a traditionally very good defensive rebounding team, which is strange because they, it's not like they're out of position a lot, but they just aren't very good at it. Michigan State rebounded 39% of their misses. Kansas State had 27%, so an edge there of 13-8 from the offensive boards.
That's even more impressive than, you got to remember Michigan State shot the ball very well.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So 11 offensive rebounds is actually, like you said, 39%. That's a really good offensive rebounding rate. MSU did what I'd hoped they could do there. They absolutely did. That would get a check mark.
And that's without the bigs in too, right? I mean, that's
right.
Yeah.
That's where now, in fairness, when they were really doing a lot, they didn't do a lot on the offensive boards in my recollection down the stretch.
No, not in the second half.
A lot of that damage happened in the first half. But that was a key to staying in it. So they got it when they needed it, to stay in touch with Kansas State. But, yeah, I mean, not a lot of complaints there. They did what you'd hoped, which is you carve out a little bit of an advantage there. And again, yeah, Kansas State's a weak defensive rebounding team, but Michigan State has been so erratic and mostly off as opposed to off and on as an offensive rebounding team that you couldn't feel 100% certain that they would take advantage of it, but they did. They found periods in the game, at least, where they took advantage.
And the fifth key to the game is cohesion. Veteran team, Michigan State, thought they'd have an advantage. And this is a Kansas State team that was kind of thrown together this season. They've only Nowell and I think MSU are the ones who are returning for their team. Most of the rest were transfers in.
Yep.
And, to their credit, Kansas State played pretty together basketball. I think there were times that they looked a little disconnected, especially on defense, but it didn't really matter too much. Michigan State, again, offensively, Kansas State was just so overwhelming that their defensive, misfirings didn't really make a difference, and they were able to do enough to win the game.
Which is the opposite of what you would have expected coming into the game. They had these were two teams that in the current KenPom ratings, at least coming into this game, probably won't be this way anymore. They were both top 25 defensive teams. Michigan State's gotten all the way up to top 25, or did before this game. Kansas State, I think, was in the teens. Offensively, can't believe it or not, Kansas State, I think, was 44th, something like that.
Yeah, I think so. 47th. 47th.
47th. Okay. So that tells you what we saw from them tonight is not what they've been over the course of the season. It is what they are right now. And in a one and done format, that's good enough.
Sure.
You have to be at your best on the day that you're playing. And they were. That team could not be better, in my opinion, from an offensive standpoint than what they were tonight. That's the best they can be.
No question.
Because they almost shot 50% from three on high volume. That's not what they do. They had 5 turnovers when they averaged whatever it
16.
was, 16 a game.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And they shot, I don't know, 50 some percent from the floor overall. I mean, it was a clinic. And, congrats. Hats off to them.
Yeah.
Because that's, and I know I said some things and I mean them about you need good fortune, and they got a lot of good fortune in this game, but they also played very, very well. And they put themselves in position where they could exploit that good fortune that they got. And that is a key to winning.
Yeah.
It's just as simple as that. And, it's easy for me to sit here and say, that it took Kansas State playing the best offensive game they're capable of to beat Michigan State in overtime. But you know what? They played the best offensive game they're capable of when it mattered.
Yeah.
So that, full credit to them. They did it. They did some things I would not have bet they could have done. I would not have bet they could have come out of this game with 5 turnovers. I would not have bet they go 11 for 24 from 3. I just would not have seen those things coming.
Yeah. Well, that's why
it happened.
That's why you play the games. You never know. And on one night, you may be better than other nights. And for sure, Kansas State tonight was a better team, and just by a little bit. And that was the difference. And they had the most dynamic player in the game as well. Absolutely. He was the best player on the court.
Hoggard was close in some ways, not the totality of it, but I mean, AJ Hoggard in the second half and for a lot of the overtime was every bit equal to him in terms of making big plays.
Mm-hmm.
And Tyson Walker stepped up and had some moments too. But look, 20 and 19 is going to be at a school like Kansas State, which, honestly does not have the basketball history that Michigan State has. This is going to go down, I would assume, as the greatest game a Kansas State player has ever played. I mean, Mitch Richmond was a phenomenal player for them back in the 80s. Rolando Blackman was there even earlier. So they've had some guys who had great NBA careers go through there. Steve Henson, in my era, like the late 80s, early 90s. They've had some very good players, but they haven't had anybody do anything like this, to my knowledge, in this kind of game, in a Sweet 16 game. That's the biggest thing. Like on that stage, you play that way. Hey, man, hats off. You deserve all the credit in the world for that.
Yep. Well, a disappointing result. It certainly felt like, this sort of felt like 2019, where you just had you saw the opening, you saw a path to the Final Four and to maybe some more, because it felt like it was there, and Kansas State saw the same thing, and they were able to seize it.
Yeah. Well, it was I think both teams, it was supposed to be a very competitive game. It was exactly that. Both teams saw an opportunity, and unfortunately only one's going to get to go on. Yeah. And that's just how it didn't work out in Michigan State's favor. But, I think what I come away with, it's going to depend. Obviously, it's going to depend on decisions that guys make.
Right.
And there's nothing assured. I am optimistic, and I have reason to be optimistic, that they're going to bring the band largely back together. But you've got 2 guys in Tyson Walker and Malik Hall that have decisions to make.
Mm-hmm.
We will see how that goes. You have some underclassmen who could opt to leave. And, you shouldn't just think that solely down to guys who didn't play very much.
Right.
There are some other guys that could opt to leave. But if they get these guys back, and the freshman class that they've got coming back is as good as I think they'll be, Michigan State can build on this.
Yes.
And use this as a springboard into next season, what could be a really, really good basketball team. Because despite how tonight went, I think if you didn't see growth in Mady Sissoko and Carson Cooper and Jackson Kohler this season, you're not paying close enough attention.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There is reason to believe that all 3 of those guys can get better. If Malik Hall comes back, a healthy off season is going to do wonders for him. And I think he would be in position to have the kind of year that it looked like he was set to have early on. Don't forget how good he was against Gonzaga and Kentucky and Villanova, for that matter. Yeah. He was really good, and then he got hurt. The backcourt that Michigan State could have is frightening. Absolutely terrifying. if you are an opponent, if all these guys come back, if Tyson Walker opts to play a COVID year, AJ Hoggard comes back, Jaden Akins comes back, there are your starters. And you saw how good they were in this tournament. What will they be like with another year under their belt? That could be a special group. And you got Trey Holloman adding another year of experience if he comes back. And you're bringing in a guy that I think has a chance to be a very special player in Jeremy Fears.
Right.
And I'll call them guards because they're wings, Garrick Norman and Cohen Carr. Cohen Carr alone will give this team an injection of something they did not have enough of this year. And that is raw, unfiltered, frightening athleticism. And then you have Xavier Booker, who's their highest rated recruit. And I know there's some back and forth on what people will expect him to be as a freshman, but he's every bit of 6'11", and he can shoot and he can handle. I'll take my chances with that. So this can be, if things break the right way, and there's, we're not going to know probably for several days at least how that looks. But if they come back collectively, this is going to be an outstanding basketball team.
Yeah, I think so too.
And we'll look at this. We'll be able to look at this game and this run as we move into the spring and the summer as, okay, they've kind of erased some of the bad taste of the last 2 years that was in the program's mouth about, not getting out of the first weekend. That's behind them now. And they've seen how close they are to being able to compete at the really high levels of this sport. And I think it'll be a launching point to even bigger things next season. Big Ten title contention, a lot of preseason hype, which,
good or bad.
Yeah. But it'll be there and serious capability of being as good as anybody.
Yep. Yeah. And it's always a tough balancing act as a fan, because it is easy to get excited about what's coming next, but you really have to relish the time you have, that this run was, and it's always disappointing to see it come to an end. And
absolutely. And where they had you felt like there was a real chance.
Sure.
Because there was.
Yeah.
I mean, they went overtime in losing this game. They obviously were right there on the edge of being in the Elite Eight. And then if you get to the Elite Eight, well, it's probably going to be Tennessee. And they're a very good team, but are they a juggernaut? No. There are no juggernauts this year. So you're right. That's something, my mindset doesn't tend to run that way, to, dwelling over what ifs, and especially not at this stage. Mm-hmm. You get beat in the Sweet 16, you're not that close to a title.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
Like, I understand Elite Eight, Final Four losses. Yeah. This stage, you had some more work to do. So this one isn't going to haunt me as a fan. I mean, I'm just speaking for myself. Mm-hmm. I'm proud of what they did in this run. I really am. And I think they provided some things that should be good memories for fans. And I think, again, pending the decisions that guys have to make, there's reason to be really optimistic about what this team can be going forward. And so that's the silver lining to this. It's why I would describe myself as disappointed, but I'm not shattered.
Yeah, no. And I think, when you look at just the season, we'll have a show. We'll kind of dissect the season and sort of the Big Ten, look at everything later. But, when you look at the way the season ended, I think it was encouraging. I think it was a fun way to end, especially with a season that was really a kind of a grind through the Big Ten portion, where you just see the ups and downs, just the inconsistency. So it was nice to see them kind of come together and have a really great game. And I mean, they lost because a team had an historic or a season best performance.
That's what it took to beat them.
So in that sense, I hate saying you tip your cap, but I think that's probably appropriate in this sense.
It is. Sometimes that's. I know people don't like hearing that, because I talk about this sometimes. This very human tendency to want to believe that there is blame to be assigned with everything that doesn't go right, mm-hmm. and that you can always fix If you would have done A and B, it would have fixed it. Well, are there things that Michigan State maybe could have done better in this game? Yes. But you have to acknowledge that was a phenomenal game by the opponent.
Yeah.
By their point guard in particular. I mean, it just was. And, I've seen games where guys in the Michigan State uniform had those kind of days.
Sure. Yeah.
And, if you're on the other side of that, and we've seen people do it, say, boy, we just couldn't deal with Magic. We just couldn't deal with Steve Smith, Scott Skiles, Mateen Cleaves, on and on and on.
Mm-hmm.
Today, Kansas State had a guy, he's not those players, but he was playing at that level. So credit to him.
Yeah. Well, we'll be back in a little while. We're gonna try and figure out what we're gonna do as far as content. It's been a great season, well, I've enjoyed myself. I'm a little extra disappointed because I started tasting the fact that I might actually see Michigan State at the Final Four since I won those tickets. I thought, wouldn't it be? Because I know when I won, I thought it didn't really even cross my mind that they would be there or that there'd be much chance of them being there. And then I thought, there's a path, and so this would be pretty amazing. So,
yeah,
it won't work out that way, but I'll have fun down at the Final Four, and maybe I'll tell Michigan State what they need to do for next year. So maybe I'll give them the taste of it. Yeah. The last thing I'd say too is, when it comes to Izzo and this tournament, I think you really see what a difference it is having a coach like him, especially the first two rounds where you see someone who basically just outcoached the other two teams and the preparation. And even this game, in some respects, you can say the preparation was there, but again, Kansas State they played at a level beyond what they sort of normally do, and so there wasn't like a bad game plan. It was kind of a game plan that just nothing you would have done probably would have made a difference at this point.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, we'll get out of here. And unfortunately, until next time, the Final Four's on the schedule. Go Green.
Well, I'll be a hitchhiker in an Easter Bunny costume. Hop in. Where are you headed?
BJ's Wholesale Club to do my Easter shopping. I have so many baskets to fill.
That costume is so lifelike. There's not even a zipper.
Oh, there's BJ's. I can hop out here.
Look at him go.
Get a $15 digital coupon when you spend $150 on practically anything in one transaction through April 9th. Coupon will appear in your digital coupon gallery on April 13th. Go to bjs.com/Easter coupon for details. BJ's. Absurdly simple savings.